Excuse me. It's 3 o'clock on January 6, 2020. This is the meeting of the Architectural Advisory Committee. Please silence all cell phones and pagers. Planning staff, please read roll call.
Member Walsh.
Here.
Member Payline.
Here.
Member McCoy.
Present.
Member Lockyer. Member Dozy.
Present.
Vice Chair Rotman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. May we have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Mr. Vice Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, January 2nd. This meeting has been posted in accordance with state law.
Does the committee have any revisions to the agenda? May I ask how many people are here to speak on the Parker, item number 6? Okay. I'd like to propose that we modify the agenda and move that item to the first item of business, new business. And I'd also like to suggest that we move item number 2, Stephen Loy for major architectural application for construction of a 1,000 square foot artist studio to the consent calendar. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. We will, let's see. So now we're going to look, I'm sorry, since this is a public meeting, audience members are permitted to comment on any issue that's within the committee's purview. Comments on an item appearing on today's agenda are made at the time the item is presented. If you want to speak on an item not on today's agenda, you may speak now. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to comment on an item that is not on today's agenda? If so, come up to the microphone, give us your name, address for the record, and proceed. Welcome.
So it looks like I picked a great time to come and talk about just general things, but gee, it's nice to have an audience. My name is Christine Hammond. I live at 2449 East Sonora Road in Palm Springs. Anything else you want to know? Okay. I'm here on behalf of a local nonprofit called Milkweed for Monarchs. We encourage the Architectural Advisory Committee to require the planting of desert milkweed, which is a habitat for monarch butterflies, in residential and commercial landscape development. Desert milkweed is listed in lush and efficient, and it's also on the DWA table of drought-tolerant plants. A massive 97% of monarch butterflies have disappeared since the 1980s, 97%. When 10 million monarchs used to winter along the California coast before returning to their homes in southern parts of Western Canada, the Pacific Northwest, and Northern California. This last Thanksgiving, the count of monarch butterflies along the California coast was 28,000. In the Coachella Valley, desert milkweed once grew along roadsides, in ditches, along washes, and rocky hillsides. As vacant land turned into more homes and more roads, with the increase in the use of pesticides and herbicides, we no longer have a lot of desert milkweed here, which is a native to this part of the country, and no monarchs. I mean the Coachella Valley. No monarchs. Monarchs migrate through the Coachella Valley in the spring and the fall of the year. The milkweed plant is the only place where the monarch lays her eggs and the only food source for the larva and the caterpillar of the monarch. Monarchs, as the bee population decreases, monarch butterflies serve a critical role as pollinators for flowers and food plants, fruit and nut trees. For survival of the monarch, one of the most important things we can do is plant and grow desert milkweed, which is the monarch habitat. In the last 2 years, our very small nonprofit has sent out over 1,000 desert milkweed plants to people who live in HOAs and residences and operate locally owned businesses in Palm Springs and neighboring communities. Over 100 plants have been donated to and planted in city parks. This is just a start. We encourage the Architectural Advisory Committee to require the planting of desert milkweed in residential and commercial landscape development. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other people who would like to address the committee? If not, we'll proceed to the meeting minutes from the last meeting. That is from December 2nd. Are there any revisions to the meeting minutes? Member Walsh?
I had one, and it was item 6, and on page 4, paragraph 5, what caught my eye was it doesn't accurately reflect what I wanted to say there. It looks like a request for clarification to the last sentence there in paragraph 5, which indicates a recommendation for approval of the project. But I understand that the corporate rebranding was the driver of the proposal. To be considered in the approval process, I did not intend my statement to make a case for a premature recommendation, as all of the parts and pieces of the proposal and the design elements that were under consideration are still under review.
Would you like us to strike that last line?
Sure, that would suffice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other revisions? Do I have a second to approve the meeting minutes as noted?
Let's see, Mr. Chair, because you have moved item number 2 to the consent agenda, not only will you be approving the meeting minutes with the change as noted, but also item number 2 on the agenda. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you for the clarification. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye. Sorry, we need a
Oh,
second.
second, I'm sorry. Second?
Second.
Okay, if we could have you vote again.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Let's proceed to, I'm sorry, let's proceed to item number 3.
Let's see, Mr. Chair, we're going to proceed to
I'm
item number
sorry. Thank
6,
you for
the Parker Palm Springs.
I'm new at this.
Doing good.
Okay, item number 6, Brandon McClurry, on behalf of Parker Palm Springs LLC for a major architectural review application to construct 13 detached buildings for 32 hotel units and accessory uses with a maximum height not to exceed 2 stories, 2 parking lots, and landscaping on a 3.7-acre undeveloped portion of the Parker Palm Springs property located at 4200 East Palm Canyon, Zone PDD 58, Section 30, case number 3.2451 MAG.
Mr. Vice Chair, before we begin the staff presentation, I'd like to give an overview of the process of this. We appreciate all the residents who've come out today, and what I want to do is to tell you about the process for this so that you can participate in every step of the process. So in terms of the application, what is being requested is an amendment to an approved plan development to construct additional hotel rooms on the Parker property. As an amendment to a plan development, it is a 3-step process. It requires the Architectural Advisory Committee to review the architectural details of the project. It requires the Planning Commission to review the project for conformance to development standards, and then ultimately the City Council has to approve the project. So AAC is recommending, Planning Commission is recommending, City Council holds the final authority on this project. So members of the public will have 3 opportunities at a minimum to comment on the project here at the AAC meeting today, at the Planning Commission meeting on Wednesday, and then at the City Council meeting, which has not been scheduled yet. So I just want to make sure you all are aware that you will have opportunities to comment at every step of the process. In terms of the review that the Architectural Advisory Committee is doing today, just like their name implies, all they're reviewing is architectural elements. The AAC does not review conformance to development standards, so they're not going to be reviewing the height or the setbacks or the parking. A lot of you have written in letters about Linden driveway access points and things like that. That is what the Planning Commission needs to hear on Wednesday. And so they will get copies of the letters that you sent in. But I just wanted you to be aware that the AAC is not going to make recommendations on those elements today. What they primarily will be looking at are the colors and the materials of the buildings, the architectural detailing of the buildings, and the landscape materials and the landscape treatment that is proposed for the new hotel portion of the property. And so that's the extent of their authority today, and then they will make recommendations to the Planning Commission. We want everyone to have the opportunity to participate under public comment today. If you have not signed in yet, don't worry. We're not as formal as the City Council. You don't need to sign in first. Just as the chair calls people up to speak, please make your comments. If you've already signed in, you don't need to do that. If you haven't signed in, just make sure that we get your name so we can include that in the minutes. But again, you don't need to sign in first if you wish to speak, and we'll make sure that everyone has the opportunity to speak if you would like to do so. So with that, Mr. Chair, that explains the process. Again, I'd like to invite members of the public to attend the Planning Commission meeting on Wednesday, where we will be talking about the development standards and traffic and driveways and those things. That meeting starts at 1:30 p.m. and will be in council chambers where we have a lot more room so everyone can have a seat. And again, I appreciate everyone who's here. I apologize that you have to stand. If you could be courteous after you've made your comments, maybe give other people who may be outside in the foyer there the chance to come in and also speak. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Noriko Kikuchi, who is the case planner. Ms. Kikuchi?
Thank you. Good afternoon. As introduced, this is a proposed project for the Parker Palm Springs Hotel. And this is a project site. The Parker property is located between, I should say, bounded by East Palm Canyon Drive, South Cherokee Way, East Seven Lakes, and South Linden Way. The overall property is 13.45 acres, and currently the hotel has 147 rooms and 154 street parkings. The proposed project, which includes the construction of 10 detached buildings and 6 accessory structures, will take place in this 3.7 acre portion of the property. And again, the project proposes 10 detached buildings, 6 accessory structures, 32 hotel units, and 2 parking lots. And these are the images of the project site as currently exists. The property is landscaped with mature ficus hedges on all corners, and the area is currently a turf. And these are just the views of the streets adjacent to the project site. And this is the proposed site plan for the project. If you may, I'd like to give additional information in front of the screen. So the project proposes the construction of the main house, which is building A over here. And then, excuse me, the building B, which is this one right here. And additional villas surrounding the landscape, and additional buildings, and there's open air pavilions, parking lots on Linden Way right here at the corner, and then also one on the Cherokee. The west parking lot accommodates 39 vehicles, and the east parking lot right here accommodates 9 vehicles. The building A, which is the main house, it's gonna be a two-story building, which is gonna accommodate 6 hotel suites on the upper level and accessory uses such as dining rooms, kitchen facility, and bar. And I will show you the details on the floor plan. And the building B, which is the second largest building, it's a two-story. It's going to accommodate 10 hotel suites. And this building CDE, CDFG. Those are the single-story villas, which is going to surround the open garden. And the building E, which is the building located right next to the parking lot on the west side, that is actually a single-story building, which is going to accommodate some hotel rooms as well. This is the floor plan. It's very difficult to see, but just to show of the proposed building. And this is the first floor and then second floor. As I mentioned before, building A and building B will be two-story, and upper level is going to accommodate hotel suites. And these are the elevations submitted by the applicant. The proposed architecture incorporates Art Deco element, and the designer, the architect, was inspired by the Ship of the Desert building in the city, and just incorporates the architectural deco elements. And the building A, the primary portion of the building will accommodate dining rooms, bar, lobby, lounge, study, salon on the ground floor, and the 6 guest rooms on the second floor, all of which will be accessible to hotel guests only and will not be open to the public. And the primary building will be connected to a separate kitchen facility. And building B, building B is the old stable block, as you see on the upper right-hand side corner. And this building will be a 10-unit hotel suites. And the building extends in a horizontal orientation and accommodates an elevator tower at the west end. The building is designed with a corridor with a sequence of arched openings on the ground level. The exterior of the corridor will be finished with natural stone veneer, and a green vertical wall is proposed on the surface of the elevator tower to softening the appearance. And the building C, D, F, G, these are single-story villas. And in contrast to building A, B, and E, the exterior of this single-story building buildings are not going to have any ornate element. This very simplistic exterior, and it's going to have a stucco exterior, and a garden facing elevation will accommodate a large door system for indoor and outdoor transition. And building E, which is right next to all this old stable block on the screen, this is actually a single-story 20-foot-high building, and the exterior will also incorporate Art Deco element. It's going to have a smooth stucco, steel frame window system on the elevations. And the building H. It's hard to see at the bottom right corner. That's the building H, the clock tower suite. The building will include 2 single-story guest suites and a 30-foot-high clock tower. The exterior of the building will be finished with smooth stucco to match building A, the villas, and the garden villas. And also, the design includes an outdoor courtyard which area is going to be defined by this wall, which is going to be finished with a natural stone veneer. And as you see on the elevation, that's the wall, which is going to be finished with natural stone veneer. And then also, right against the existing buildings, there will be garden villas, which can be shown better on this floor plan. The building J, as you see at the bottom one, between what's called building K and the building H. And again, these are going to be hotel suites for the guests as well. And this is the renderings provided by the applicant. This is the main building, so building A. And the view of the development from the orchard landscape. And the overall building and the development of the site. And this is a view of building J. And as I mentioned, the project proposes the use of smooth stucco, the steel window system, and these are just the material board for the applicant to communicate to the Architecture Advisory Committee what the applicant is thinking in terms of the proposed materials for the buildings and the color palette. The proposed landscape design consists of several specific sub-areas, as you see, a secret garden, gathering area, sculpture wall, cactus, a garden, pool area, and so forth. And the design was developed based on the function of those sub-areas. And this is the overall landscape view of the site that's being proposed. The applicant is proposing to use the different types of material in certain areas to bring a lot of details and then also add richness to the site. This is just a cross section to show that the proposed landscape will create a very lush landscape to the site. As you see, there's some trees, and I'm not sure if any of you has visited the Parker, but it is consistent with the landscape of the property as currently exists. There are a few issues. The parking lot configurations need to fully conform to the zoning and fire department regulations. Right now, the the west parking lot, which provides a 24 feet in the spacing, that actually does not meet the code requirement, and it should be actually 26. And then also the driveway openings on the Linden Way should be 24 as well. So those minor changes needs to be made. However, staff finds that it's not going to alter the layout or the relationship amongst the buildings or anything. And then also, the submitted plans do not fully provide architectural details of accessory structures such as attendant booth, and then also the pavilion canopy structures and so forth. The staff finds that, well, the Parker Palm Springs consists of different types of architectural style currently, and the proposed project follows the same pattern. The project proposes 3 architectural designs for the 10 buildings. However, if you look at the Parker Palm Springs as a whole, it's contextually appropriate. The collection of different architectural style, eclectic atmosphere, that's the identity of the Parker Palm Springs property. And then also, staff finds that the proposed landscape is functional and it provides details that complement the buildings and the intended use of the subspaces. And also, generally conform to the applicable regulations. Again, that's going to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. And considering these facts and information, the staff recommends the AAC AAC recommends approval to the Planning Commission subject to conditions of approval that are included in the staff report. And this concludes the staff presentation, and applicant is here today, and he would like to give a short presentation to the committee as well.
Thank you, Noriko. Do we have any questions for staff? Member Walsh?
Sure. Noriko, with respect to the site plan and the staff report, you've identified the parking requirements that are not compliant with respect to dimensions. Is there a statistical deficiency in the number of parking spaces that would be required?
The site is currently, does not conform to the off-street parking requirements. But again, that's something that the planning commission will be reviewing. An applicant has submitted a specific parking plan via land use permit to rectify the issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Member Desmond?
Regarding the existing ficus hedge that surrounds the perimeter, it appears that due to grading or some other reasons, that may be removed and then a new hedge put in its place?
The majority of the existing hedges, I should say, will remain. However, there will be a few openings that will be needed for vehicle access.
Okay, thank you.
In one of the renders I saw, it looked like there was a block wall against the sidewalk. So that wouldn't be consistent with keeping the hedge. If you can go back to that sort of.
Just to
side
clarify,
render.
yes. So you're going to see two hedges that are parallel to each other. The outer edge is actual hedge that currently exists, and the interior hedge is to screen the view of the emergency or service vehicle access. So the proposed garden walls will not going to be visible from the street.
Member Walsh?
Noriko, there's mention of a clock tower, and I think it's building F. Does it appear in elevation? And I'm missing it?
Actually, I think it's H.
H, all right. Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions? No?
Is there a call out for the width of that access road along the north side there? It seems, so that's used for carts or service vehicles, room service?
Yes, the golf carts, not golf carts, I'm sorry, but the service vehicle to access to those hotel suites in the back.
Okay. And that material is this chip, it's not like a asphalt, but it's similar.
The same material, it is the staff's understanding that the same material that's been proposed for the parking lot will be applied in this area. And again, the applicant can confirm that information.
Okay.
I have a question, Noriko. So the buildings, is it 11 through 13 and L1 and L2? Are there functions identified for those, do you know, or are they?
Yes. So the building L1 and L2, these are attendant booths. So
Okay.
when the guests drive in to drop off their vehicle for valet service, someone will be able to provide the service. So that's what the intent of these two structures are. And building K it's called a building, but this is actually the open air trellis structure. But that's what's called the open air pavilion. And the applicant is proposing the similar structure over here for pool pavilion. So it's called a building, but all sides are open. And the building 13 is a restroom, and the building building, I've been calling it 13, but it's actually building I3 is a restroom, and building I1 is a service room.
Okay, all right. And, yeah, okay. Any other questions for staff? Is the applicant present? If so, please come up to the mic, give us your name and address, and tell us about your project. You have 10 minutes to present, and there will be 2 minutes of rebuttal if desired after any public comment.
Yes, you can use this one.
The alternative is you take this out and plug it in the
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Click share drive.
Okay.
I got it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Good.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brian Libet. I am the principal at Studio MMD, and we are the architecture firm responsible for the architectural design of the Parker Hall project at the Parker Palm Springs Resort. I'm joined today by Judy Camion of Elysian Landscapes, and they're responsible for the landscape design, as well as Brandon McClurley, the general manager of the Parker Palm Springs Resort. Today, we'd just like to talk a little bit about an introduction to the Parker Palm Springs currently and the Jack Parker Corporation, how the idea of Parker Hall was generated, the narrative around our design, and we'll walk through the site plan. And thank you, Noriko and Flynn, for an introduction to the project. We'll talk a little bit about the buildings and architecture, as well as the gardens and landscaping, and some timeline aspects of the project, and then obviously answer questions. The Jack Parker Corporation purchased the Parker Palm Springs Resort in the early 2000s, in 2002, and with the design direction of Jonathan Adler and Judy's firm Elysian Landscapes, transformed the resort into what is now the Parker Palm Springs. It was at the time the first 5-star resort in the Palm Springs area, and really helped create Palm Springs as a destination for design. The back portion of the property, which is the current project site, has always been an unused lawn, and for over time, the Jack Parker Corporation and the current ownership, they really loved the current scale of the resort and didn't want to expand the resort to be any larger and just open up more hotel rooms that were part of this resort. And so they had this idea of, that was spurred from the current Gene Autry house that is on the resort, of what if there was an actual estate or a house of a separate resort on the property. And we took inspiration from a time almost at the founding of Palm Springs, a very earlier time of the streamlined modern style, and were inspired by structures such as the Ship of the Desert and Cherry Hill Estate in England. And so the idea was the concept was to create this almost historic estate that would be next door to the Parker, and design it in a way that had layers of history with appearance of buildings that were constructed over time, which would lead to this idea, if you've seen in this middle, of various architectural styles that are composed together to make it seem as this estate was constructed over time, which helped create a sense of place and a feeling like the estate always existed. And the key of the key of this design was that we wanted to create buildings that were at a domestic scale and not at a resort scale. And the streamlined modern structure references this area, as I said, around the founding of Palm Springs before the boom of mid-century modernism. And this is accompanied by more vernacular outbuildings, which Noriko walked through too, such as this old stable barn that we've tried to put some modern interventions into. As terms of the design language, we spoke about the streamlined modern and some of these more vernacular outbuildings on the grounds. That also too would be in this estate grounds of a garden that created as a way to tie the different structures together and tie the different architectures together with the plant palette and the different landscaped rooms. To rehash the site plan that Noriko walked through too, there's the main house structure, which is the life of the resort. One of the key things about the main house is that currently right now at the Parker Palm Springs, this is a lawn, which is used for events. This will internalize a lot of the activities on the property, and they would take place indoors now as on this separate resort. And this would be the main life of the property. And walking around, as we said before, there's the old stable block, the garden villas, a smaller, almost mini house in the back along the west side, which we're calling the Bachelor Residence, the clock tower suites, and a state pool. Previous view that we walked through of the design. So the main structure of the house, the main structure of the property is this streamlined modern house. It will have 6 guest suites on the upper floor. The center portion, the entry hall, will have a maximum height of 30 feet, but most of the structure is either at 15 or 26 feet tall. It will be the central hub of the state, and it's almost thought of as this house for entertaining, and it was inspired by the Ship of the Desert, Cherry Hill, and some of the earlier streamlined modern works of Pierre Pateau. In terms of the old stable block, it's a old stone guest stables converted into guest suites. And then this was done through what we're envisioning as a simple modern intervention into this stone relic almost that's on the site, trying to create these layers of history. We looked a lot at some of these early stone buildings in Palm Springs of R. Lee Miller to get some of the palette for the materials and using local stone. The height of this would be at a maximum of 24 feet at the ridge of the structure. Another key building, which is smaller, would be this bachelor's residence. It's a 2-bedroom villa on the west side of the property along Cherokee. This, again, has simpler, streamlined, modern details. The entry piece would be at 20 feet, but most of the structure is at 15. The other key architectural building is this clock tower suite, and this is envisioned as a sculptural element almost that makes a statement towards the Parker Palm Springs, the current Parker Palm Springs property. It's almost this statement towards the funkier sister property to the south. The two resorts are thought of as, the two pieces of the property are thought of as separate. So this portion of the property, you have to have a reservation to visit, to stay here. The two properties won't intermingle per se. And this is a much smaller property of only 32 guest rooms. The tower element it's small. It's only 8 by 8 in plan, but it's 30 feet tall. But the rest of the guest suites are only 14 feet. And then sprinkled throughout the site, as we've seen before, are these various outbuildings and villas that have a simpler, streamlined, modern language in a more vernacular setting. And those are mostly 14 feet with some of these accessory trellises at 10 feet tall. Judy could talk a little bit about the gardens and the landscaping design to complement the architecture too.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share our design. And it's very exciting to be back here 15 years later to look at this last piece of the property that's never been touched. Currently, it's almost 4 acres of lawn with hedges, very few trees. And we're thrilled to propose some new ideas for this important piece of property. Here, will you?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. So the idea for the landscape is to complement the architectural concept, and it's an unusual pairing of creating an estate garden in the desert. So we're looking to use the kind of the formal bones of a classic estate garden with a lot of symmetry and axial relationships that then transition into a more organic organization using climate-appropriate plant material. As Mariko had mentioned, there are these sort of different special gardens within the greater landscape. Each one has a different palette and use. In the AAC submittal, we provided more detail on each individual space that have specific palettes attached that explore color, texture, fragrance, form, and it will be very complementary to the existing property, yet have its own identity. Rather than fill the space with plants and make it very dense, as is Parker Palm Springs now, we'll be keeping a much more expansive and open feeling to the property. We want to maintain sightlines to the mountains, yet we will continue to keep our hedging and privacy along the perimeter so that buildings, services, cars will be screened from the community. So there is, the idea for the landscape is that there are these special and distinct gardens within a greater strolling garden, rather than just treating the site with one brushstroke. Very much like the direction with the architecture, we're creating these special spaces that can be used for small gatherings and intimate events for the guests. In this portion and only this portion of the property. And it will all be knit together within the larger landscape.
Do you have much more?
No, just a couple.
We only have like 3 more slides.
I wanted just to touch on the sustainability, if I may, if that's okay. Okay. Quickly, we are taking a very focused approach to creating a sustainable landscape. Rather than have 4 acres of lawn to irrigate, we'll be using low water need plants that are climate appropriate. We'll be planting an abundance of trees to create shade, passive cooling, and to help soften and screen the buildings. And we have exceeded the requirements for the shade in the parking areas to cool off the vehicles and spaces to be occupied. We'll be using a high-efficiency irrigation system, the majority of which would be drip irrigation and bubblers. And I think, and overall, we're most excited about is creating a continuity to the greater landscape of the desert, the habitat, planting pollinators, things that will support the natural fauna, as well as bring in the desert flora.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So now we are, let's see here. We're open to public comment. If you have something you'd like to say about this agenda item, please come up to the podium. You can step down for now.
Thank you so much.
And you give us your name and address. And you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rick Miller. I'm at 2234 South Linden Way in Palm Springs. I'd like to say I think this project is misrepresented as 32 guest rooms and resort amenities. The main use is a center for continuous 24/7 large events as stated by the letter of justification, which was submitted by the applicant, although I did not see it in the packet. The floor plan for the Parker Hall supports the letter by simply by counting seats and areas showing 130 guest occupancy indoors and 120 guest occupancy in defined outside gathering areas for a total of occupancy of 250 people plus new employees, or plus employees. The letter also goes on to state there's no negative impacts are expected on the surrounding community. Recent events, last Thursday, for example, the film festival reception, shows that large events do have a negative impact on Canyon Sands residents. Although that only happens once a year, I understand the explanation in the letter of justification is large events and continuous events. Speaking of the architecture, the rendering scene, commonly seen in the press and shown here first, is a beautiful piece of architecture. I don't think anybody has any quarrels of that. However, it's a viewpoint that no one will ever see. The viewpoint is taken from one of our homes in the center, in the complex. I think it's very important to show architecture within the context of the site. The residents have done some studies, some architectural studies, and it shows Parker Hall being completely out of scale with adjacent single-story homes being 2 stories and 30 feet high. It towers over our homes, protruding 15 feet above the surrounding hedges. Instead of providing complete privacy, it provides an intrusion of privacy for both hotel guests above that hedge and for residents in adjacent properties. This massive, majestic architecture statement benefits a handful of guests on the second floor of Parker Hall, but has a devastating visual impact on all Canyon Sands residents in the northwest corner of the complex. Siting of the entrance and exit for a large event center on Linden Way is perplexing. There are other locations, I'm sure you know. The siting, all of the drawings that we've seen of the proposal drawing do not show the site within context. Architecture, being one of the truly useful arts, depends on the primary core use for people. We're people that live in the community and are affected by this architecture, and we'd like to see the plan respond to the community. It does not currently, and it wasn't studied, and we think there is reason to reject this application, return to the, resubmit the project with the correct description as a large event center, which is what's supported by the plan and documents by the applicant, and to work with the community for a plan that works, truly works with the community, involve the community from the beginning through approvals, construction, which affects the community, and a period of time of compliance in a formal process that is sanctioned by the City of Palm Springs. Thank you.
Next person, please. And if you don't mind refraining from applauding, that'll just, thank you.
My name's Peter Nielsen. I live at 2440 South Linden Way. And I just want to say it's a beautiful property, and it was really inspiring to hear a lot of talk about the landscape. I have visited the hotel and really admire it. I was taken by the emphasis of sight lines that are being created within the unit. However, on the Linden Way side of the property, all of the sight lines for us as residents are completely shielded by the hedge and the lack of sort of integrated setbacks, maybe a mix of materials. Because there is such a heavy emphasis on the landscaping for the Parker, it would really, we as residents would appreciate a little something being given to the neighborhood. So basically all we ever see is a large hedge that doesn't add really any additional materials except that which is provided by the city on Highway 111. So I would really like to sort of challenge the Parker company to consider, enhancing their landscaping so it could contribute a little bit more to the community for those of us who live around it, and also consider the sight lines for Linden Way and perhaps maintain those a little bit lower so we can have more views, which is important to the hotel. So thank you, and I'll have other comments on Wednesday.
Thank you. Next person.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Sandman. I live at 2466 Linden Way, Unit C. The front of my unit, my front door and kitchen window both face the Parker. First question I have is there a jurisdiction on the height of landscaping? When the Parker Meridian was originally built, the landscape was meticulous, the hedges were trimmed, the lollipop trees were trimmed. I understand that the new Parker has gone for a more eclectic look. However, the trees themselves do block the views, even if they trim the hedges, which finally about 2 years ago they did. I would say also, with regard to the landscaping, I agree with the gentleman who just spoke. The landscaping from the outside, even though they do trim the outside of the hedges to a straight line, is jagged, and nobody takes care of the land underneath the landscaping. It seems like the Parker just sort of lets the street side go to waste. It was also interesting to hear them speak about access from one side of the hotel to the other side of the hotel. Now it suddenly seems they're actually building a separate residence, a separate hotel, not an extension of the Parker, but an addendum to the Parker. So I was curious about that as well. The design is beautiful, but it does seem it's based on function, form rather than function.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle Johnson, 2441 South Gene Autry. I'm wondering why a two-story building needs to be 30 feet tall. It's going to really, and it seems like it's really massive and out of scale to the surrounding neighborhood. The surrounding neighborhood is maybe 17 feet tall at most, and it just doesn't seem right. And also looking at the plans with all the different elements and stuff, it kind of seems like a hodgepodge of design, especially the arches just seem out of place with most of what the rest of the resort style is. And I don't know why would they would want an entrance on a very small residential street with nothing to it and no access when there's a resort style street on the other side that would be much easier to get in and out of and have less effect on the residential side rather than the resort side. So I just think it needs to be turned around a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Next person.
Thank you for letting us talk. My name is Kathy Holmquist Burks, and I live at 2262 South Linden Way. I too noticed the statement maintaining sight lines to the mountains. This morning, I looked out of my driveway, which is driveway number 9, which is right across from where this entrance is supposed to be placed, and I could see the beautiful mountain. And with a two-story building, there's no way that we will have a sight line to that mountain. And I am thinking that the city should consider the needs and caring of the 320 plus, I'm sure there's more than 320 of us that live in Canyon Sands, but consider those people above 332 or above 32 residents that come as guests to stay in this new hotel. And that newness of the hotel too does concern me as a resident. The quietness of the neighborhood was one of the things that attracted us to this area. And it is already somewhat noisy because of the semis that come in with a lot of things, but adding that entrance would be difficult. But I am more concerned about the sight line to the mountains that we have that will be gone if that building goes up, because it's right in the way.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed Steinwender, 2466 South Linden, Unit E. I imagine that the Parker's Hotel would love to continue to be a good neighbor, and we've been a good neighbor to you guys. Question to you is that this is a beautiful plan that you're presenting, and it will actually, none of us are stopping you from creating this. I think we would love this to be built, this brand new hotel that you guys are building. But would you not accomplish exactly the same thing if you just reverse the plan? If you put everything on the Cherokee side and still have your lush garden, your color scheme, your whatever words that was being thrown around today, architecture, and that would just help your neighbor on South Linden, because you won't affect our views, you won't affect our traffic, you won't have to create an entrance on South Linden where it doesn't deserve to be disturbed. That's the only question I have for you guys. Just be a good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Malia Daly, 2234 South Linden, and again, to the architect, it's a beautiful design. It's hodgepodgey, I agree. The road on Linden is 40 feet wide. The road on Cherokee is 64 feet wide. You're going to have attendant booths sitting out literally in our front yard. There's no trees that are going to cover this. It's going to create traffic, and no amount of lush, lush greenery and everything is going to stop the noises from the kitchen. I believe that this design has to be switched. Also, I must bring up that on Cherokee, you'll notice that there are power lines there. That's probably what's stopping them from switching that. But nowhere else do you see power lines. All our power lines are underground. So I say to the Parker, put your ugly power lines underground, which is also, we have a lot of wind, a wind factor, fires. Put that underground. Put your entrance out on Cherokee. There's a traffic light there that will stop our guests from being smeared up and down 111, because there's only a left-hand turn off of 111, and that's very dangerous. We almost had a couple of residents die 2 nights ago. And also, it's a wider road, and the Oasis Resort is a timeshare. 7 Lakes, their homes are all tucked inside. Flip the design. Be a good neighbor, flip the design. And just flip the design. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
Hello, I'm John Kirchdorfer, 4455 East 7 Lakes Drive. I agree with everyone. I think the only problem is the access to Parker Hall. I don't know if anybody has been here since the Cody place started back in the early 2000s, but that was one of the situations where the neighborhood was involved in that because the neighborhood organizations started becoming up. They're into the same issue. We're looking at access and ingress and egress on Linden Way. There's no way that you're not going to have headlights shining into people's bedrooms, living rooms, and patio areas. What they did at the Cody place is they put the access onto Palm Canyon, which I think everyone here would be happy. The height of the building, they're fine. If you want to move the building back, people are talking sight line, move the building to the other side of the property, your sight line is there. But it's just right here. The further back, you're in an entire block. So I think that we just kind of need, and I think everyone here would agree that if they would just flip the buildings around, you would be able to sit there and have Parker Hall on Cherokee, entered on Cherokee, much more space on Cherokee. We still have the issue of the parking. I know we're talking about this as a high-end resort, but I kind of was skeptical when I sat there and saw the parking spaces. The number of compact cars is almost half. And if I'm spending $4,000 or $5,000 a night, I don't think that I'm going to be driving a compact car into the hotel. So the parking issue is a thing, but it's one of those things, living next to something like that, as a neighbor, you do have to adjust to the different parkings. But, you know, we just really need to look at the parking of how it's being handled and just take a special look at those compact car spaces.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Hi there. I'm Steve Sander, 2466 South Linden. I live directly across from one of the two driveways. My bedroom, my living room, my kitchen will all see these headlights. Kind of adding specifically to this parking, we currently already on busy evenings at the Parker have the street is filled with parking from employees, from valet. So the street is already being utilized that way. So right away we're clogged with parked cars. If there's going to be less parking, it's going to create more issue. Not sure where those cars are going to continue to be parked. But as it is, there are days and times where our street is fully blocked. I think adding entry and exit there is going to just make that worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from, thank you.
Peter McPherson, 2360 Miramonte Circle, Canyon Sands. I agree with what I've heard today. A couple of things. Nobody's mentioned the noise, and I noticed that this is going to be a bar sort of in Parker Hall, and we get enough noise. I mean, I'm in the center of the property, but we get enough noise from the Parker when they're having parties. Granted, they close it off at 11 o'clock, but it's still a noisy thing. Safety. Left turns off Linden are really difficult now. That's when we come down the South Linden Road, the frontage road. Very difficult to get onto 111. Very difficult to get off onto Gene Autry from Seven Lakes Drive. You're going to put more cars in those two streets. And it's really difficult, and that's where people are going to go. Parking, incidentally, on your map, at least what I saw on something, you show 19 spaces or something. I only counted 15. I don't know if anybody has checked that. One thing that's notable, and it's been alluded to by other people here, on Cherokee, there's no homes directly fronting onto Cherokee. On Seven Lakes Drive, there's no homes front. This is from Seven Lakes Country Club, no homes. But on Linden Way, there's 48 homes that front onto Linden Way. I don't know, it just didn't seem to make sense to have everybody coming down Linden Way when you got us coming out of driveways and things like that. I think what everybody said, flipping just makes eminent sense. The frontage road, South Canyon Sands Drive, is now packed with cars being parked when there's an event. Just today, driving over here, I think I counted almost 60 cars, and this was just an easy day, and just at random, on the three streets, Seven Lakes, Linden, and Cherokee. Those are employees. I don't know where they're going to park, but there are going to be more employees working there. I think that's about it. Thank you very much. I think safety is a big thing on Linden. I know I can wait there and wait there. A lot of people don't know that that's a suicide lane there, and I don't want to have it go worse than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Vanning. I live at 2392 Miramonte Circle East in Canyon Sands. Having lived here for a number of years, a few years back, we were having a lot of problems with the Parker having major events, the noise level. But worse than the noise was that the people who live along Linden, whose driveways lead out to Linden, with parking on both sides of Linden, the event people came in big semis, parked them in the middle of the street, turned the engines off, and they were there for the duration of the event. The street was completely blocked. We had problems with the fire department that talked about that, and we talked to the city and the fire department, and we eventually had meetings with the Parker, and they agreed to tell us that those semis would never block the streets again. If you're adding more stuff to the Linden side of that property, there's going to be more chance for that to happen again, especially if they're not the same property. You're talking about two different properties now. It is really not a good feeling to have your driveway. We have 4 driveways, like the gentleman said, with 48 homes that exit and enter on Linden. And it's difficult for them. Emergency vehicles, we have a lot of elderly. Emergency vehicles need to make their entrance, fire engines. If we lived on Cherokee, there'd be plenty of room, but we don't. I think the plan looks great. If you put the house over there and the bachelor house over to the east, west, east side, be much better. Everything else about it looks great. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anybody else? Thank you.
My name is Douglas Balson. I live at 2344 South Linden Way. Want to expand on what he says. I have pictures here of Linden. 10 to 20 times a week, we have semis that stop, and these semis can spend 4 to 6 hours, and they block. They're not pulling up against the sidewalks, but they're right in the middle of the street. So with the added rooms and what you're doing here, all I can see is more congestion on Linden. Plus, the way I read this thing, they're going to have an entryway on Linden for people that want to stay at the resort. This is just an exercise in madness. I agree that we've got so much traffic there trying to get out on East Palm Canyon or on Gene Autry off of Seven Lakes is a nightmare right now. This is only going to compound that. I don't know if you want to see these or not.
Yeah.
You can just
Thank
pass,
you.
you can have them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak?
Hello, I'm Harvey Lewis at 2352 Miramonte Circle. I agree with everything that's been said. I just want to add a couple of things. I need to reiterate all the other stuff. One is the noise already when they have the big parties. You can not only just hear the music, you can also, it's so loud you can understand the lyrics being sung. And so to add more big partying is going to just add to that. And right now it goes on to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And so that's a big issue to me. And the other is, as somebody said earlier, is that if we're really good neighbors. We have 299 homes there, and we're good. You can see we care about each other. We're here today, and we care about each other, and it's a wonderful community. And I feel like if the Parker had really wanted to be a good neighbors to us, they would have sat down with, and we're good neighbors. We're great neighbors. We take care of the neighborhood. It's immaculate. We have a great HOA. Everything is done perfectly. And if they wanted to be good neighbors to us, they would have sat down with us before this ever started and said, here's what we're going to do or want to do. And what are the issues? Let's talk them out and solve it now. Because my fear is that once this goes forward, if it goes forward, it's too late to change it. So that's why it's, to me, we should back up and the Parker meet with Canyon Sands and work through all the issues and get it settled before we progress. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Tony Sestrich, and I live at 2380 Miramonte Circle West. And I can really only echo what others have said. I think that when you live in Palm Springs, we understand the nature of our community. We are a resort destination. And I would think that almost all of the folks here, we're not anti-growth or anti-development, but smart development, and to consider the needs of the permanent residents as well as the guests who visit us. And I understand that as the architectural committee, the scope that you have before you is not all encompassing to the concerns that we have here today. But from an architectural standpoint, again, as others have already said, the height of the building or perhaps the location is more of the issue of the two-story building that was going to impact people's views, their enjoyment of their homes, and perhaps their home values. While safety may not be what you are tasked with, I think it's important to understand that we can't just put the issues in separate silos and have them unrelated. As a resident, I can tell you, as others have, that even now, if I were driving down Linden to get onto East Palm Canyon, I wouldn't do that at this hour. It's too dangerous with cars coming at 50 miles an hour plus from both directions. I would go all the way around to Gene Autry and to where there's a light to make a left. Now, I know that as a resident, but visitors here aren't going to be knowledgeable about that. And again, it is a safety issue, and I think that you can't divorce that from the overall concept, whether it's architectural or just safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If that concludes our public comments, I'd like to bring the applicant back up if he'd like to make a rebuttal to the public comments. And if so, you have a few minutes, 2 minutes. I was looking for the number.
I'll introduce myself since I wasn't in the first half. My name is Michael McDonald. I'm another principal at Studio MMD, the architect. So did you have specific questions or items you wanted us to address?
No, this is your opportunity to rebut some of the comments you've heard from the public.
We appreciate all the comments. I think one of the things to point out is that right now, Linden Way is the backside of the Parker property. And as such, we can't speak on behalf of the facility's operation, we're just the architect, but in terms of our design thinking, making that front of house is important to doing what a lot of their neighbors are requesting of being a better neighbor, of having eyes on the street and making this something that does get addressed quickly and timely. If you think about the front door being on Linden Way, the first experience that their guests have, they want it to be a pleasant, positive experience. I can't speak for their operations, but the idea of having the entrance there will make it such that it would not make sense for them to allow any vendors to violate any city codes in terms of access to park big vehicles that block the way or make that guest experience a negative one. So I think that by orienting the hotel towards Linden, we're trying to make Linden better treated and to be a better neighbor by making sure that there are eyes on the street, like I said, and that they will be quicker to make sure that any vendors who are behaving poorly are addressed very quickly and not allowed to do so.
Okay. So that will, you please stay there. Do we have any questions for the applicant from the committee?
I guess.
I'm sorry, you had your opportunity to speak. Thank you.
I have a question. Narika, could you bring up the site plan, please, on the screen? I was hoping you could kind of walk us through the arrival sequence, if you're a guest, and how that works. There was some mention of it being kind of a separate use project from the main Parker, but yet within the landscape presentation, there are some connections. So if I were going to stay here, how, and I arrive to check in and so forth, could you walk us through that? And along with that too, is how the service is addressed, the service areas or deliveries or pickups, trash, those type of things.
So the idea of this portion of the property is that as it only having 32 beds, you will the only people who are will be allowed to visit here will be hotel guests. So the bar will not be open to the public, any of the dining facilities will not be open to the public, only to the 32 guests here. So the 32 guests, or the people who are registered guests, they'll be listed with the person at the gate. So you'll either arrive from the airport or through Uber or on your own vehicle. The hotel will know you're arriving. So obviously, because you'll have a reservation, and you will arrive here, and then obviously they will check you in, and staff will take you to one of your rooms, either throughout the property or inside the main house on the second floor.
All parking.
And yes, all parking will be by valet, as currently is at the Parker Palm Springs Resort. So you never self-park a vehicle. Additionally, and most of the resort is interiorly focused as well too. And when Judy was speaking about the landscape, a lot of it is like visual connections because the lushness of the previous resort. In terms of deliveries and service, all of that is going to be handled in the current loading, will be now handled in the current loading zone, which is on the site plan over here. Over here, which is in this area right here now. So this will be eliminated now. This engineering service portion of the resort is going to be eliminated, and all of that will be here. As shown in the previous site plan, there is like a golf cart path here, and that is how all housekeeping and trash will be removed and taken along this path back to the interiorly back to the compactor and the service area of the resort.
And it shows on the site plan a large hardscape area would be northeast of the kitchen, up in that corner where by Seven Lakes and Linden. What is that area for?
This right here is just to stage anything that has, if they have a golf cart or something needs here to be staged and brought into the kitchen, it would be dropped off there.
Okay, and would that also be staging for room service carts and so forth?
Most of that isn't done through carts. It's done currently, and Brandon, the general manager, could speak better. It's just carried by hand.
Okay.
As well, there's some openings, as Noriko mentioned previously, as required by the fire department in order to access the site through Seven Lakes.
So basically, they arrive at the drop-off there, check in, their car's taken, parked on site.
Correct.
At one of the parking lots.
Walk through the house and then through the grounds to their suite.
And will there be a signage program or something so that there's not confusion between, going to the main Parker Hotel along Palm Canyon versus this?
Yes, and maybe Brandon, the general manager, could speak. As we've been told, obviously the guests, when they make the reservation, will be given an email or type of written confirmation of where the entrance is and directions to the resort as well, versus arriving at the previous resort. So that will be spelled out clear to the guest.
Okay, thank you.
I want to follow up on the parking issue, and I guess maybe Flynn, I'm not sure when, if there's, because obviously the site is underparked already because there are so many cars on Cherokee Way constantly.
Please.
Well, the parking starts at Cherokee because it's closest to the entrance and it wraps around. I've driven by it a million times, so I know how many cars are there. It's pretty.
Excuse me.
So with 33 beds in this area, their drop off of valet, there's only 9 spaces, I believe, that are nearby. Where does the valet park the car? I guess the question.
The valet
back out onto the.
Will be parking the cars on.
So they're going back out to Palm Canyon and going around Cherokee Way to get back into the parking.
Or around Seven Lakes.
Or Seven Lakes. A long way to go. Okay. I guess one question, Flynn, I don't know if this is time, is since we kind of know it's underparked, will that be addressed at the in the planning?
Correct, that the Planning Commission is the one who has that responsibility over development standards such as parking. You all, as the architectural advisory, look at the configuration of the site plan, but it's really the Planning Commission who looks at the parking numbers and the adequacy of that based on the use.
Right.
Any other questions for the applicant? Member McCoy?
So, again, follow-up. Trash services are on the Parker property?
Correct.
Okay. And the food, delivering food to the kitchen?
It would, so we've been working with a food service consultant as well as with the Parker management. The concept is that the majority of food that is prepared is still happening from the current location on the existing Parker Palm Springs. There is a secondary kitchen here, so there may be some food prep that is happening. But to answer your question about deliveries, all deliveries are happening to the current Parker at the current location.
Okay, then broken down and taken.
Yeah, staged.
This is tied to the.
Sorry, this kitchen is more of a finishing kitchen, and food prep will be done at the current Parker Palm Springs Resort.
Okay. And so essentially part of the valet route is using City Street to access each side of the property.
As well as the parking lot that is accessible from the front, too.
Okay. All right, where else was it? That's all for the moment. Thanks.
Member Walsh, any questions for the applicant?
Oh, you had, as I look at this, there is a commerce and a business relationship between this part of the Parker and the existing, correct? Okay, so, but it doesn't seem as though the site plans are at all integrated.
The idea was that if this would almost feel as a separate resort.
Okay, so this was your goal?
Correct.
All right. Okay, and Flynn, can we discuss issues of building height?
You can. I will tell you that per the development standards, it does comply with the R3 zone district in terms of height. If you're looking at it relative to proportion and things like that, then that's worthy of discussion by the AAC.
Okay, so as we look at the elevations and where you have landed in terms of building heights, was there ever, what were the drivers around that? Was there consideration to do anything perhaps lower or different?
A lot of the building height was driven by a combination of the functions inside the spaces, as well as being either hotel suites or on the lower level of the main house, being this like entertaining aspects space with a bar and a library. So we're trying to maintain almost an interior space, let's say, of 12 feet. Yes. And then the other key factor, which is driving the building height, is we wanted to make sure that we had a tall enough parapet around the building to shield any mechanical units, so that those wouldn't be visible from the street. So some of the buildings, especially the main one, almost have some of them have a 4 foot, some almost have a 6 foot tall parapet in order to shield mechanical equipment.
Yes, and I wonder if there might be alternatives around that.
Yeah, the idea was we wanted to make sure that that wasn't located on the ground in order to avoid noise to the community and to the guests of the hotel.
Okay. And the last thing that I would make note of is from a big picture standpoint, I understand from reading the narrative how you took this path in terms of the architectural style that you have incorporated. Okay, and the existing Parker Resort has no visual or architectural relationship, correct?
Yeah, the current Parker Resort, and Judy can also speak about this too, it has a very neutral architecture in the sense of they're basically white stucco boxes. Yes. Or that are almost camouflaged by the elaborate landscaping. And this resort and the idea of it is that we wanted there to be almost the reverse relationship of that, with there being an architecture that's complemented by the gardens instead of disguised by the gardens.
Okay. And it just, I would share with you that, absent reading the narrative, I'm not quite sure if people who just see it for the first time get it. And I felt challenged personally that this, I have trouble having it hang together from an aesthetic standpoint, and I was just wondering if there was more, if there were other examples that you drew upon that kind of led you in this direction.
I mean, I think we spoke to many of, our key kind of like inspiration, but I think the idea is, yes, that it's supposed to be a story. We're using architecture in a way to tell a story, which for us is extremely fun and exciting to do, but it does need to have a little complexity. It shouldn't feel like it's something that was just made as a resort. We're trying to evoke something that feels like it was something else before, and we're not quite sure exactly what that is. And so layering in those kind of elements of architectural styles is the key for us to kind of give hints to that people at their first visit might not necessarily get, but it certainly inspires a little bit of intrigue and kind of interest, which is a big part of the goal of this.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add that this idea that it almost appears from an earlier time before mid-century modernism was one of the key drivers from the design team between us and Elysian and the interiors team as well too.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'm sorry, you had.
Well, we want to rebut to what.
No, you don't have that opportunity, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, because they've added new information.
So I have a couple questions. So the space between the existing property, the existing Parker and the proposed new, it looks like, if we can get a site plan pulled up, that one's good. So along the south side of this, what is that no man's land, that's like unhatched or between the hedge and what's beyond it?
It's currently landscaped now between what's called the north building of the Parker, which is that L-shaped, upside-down L-shaped building. So that landscaping is going to remain there. It might get filled in as well too. And then the units that are abutting that in the new portion of the resort are going to have it's going to have 10 feet of garden, and then the hotel suites start as well. So they're going to have their own like private gardens, those suites that buffer between them and the current resort.
But those gardens are walled in? They're like.
Yeah, they will have a 6-foot wall.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is similar. I don't know if you've seen at the current Parker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a landscape question. Is this pretty much all flat, or are you mounding things? Are some things depressed? What's the topography like in the central area?
The site is relatively flat. I think there's only, I think there's 9 feet of elevation change from one end to the other, so it's quite gentle. But because we want to keep it open to the views, we're not looking to create any significant changes in topography.
Okay. And I've heard you say that you're trying not to disguise the buildings, but is there some sense of mystery as you work through the site to go from one building to the next, or or is it all just kind of flat and you've got a cactus garden, you've got the secret garden? Can you talk a little bit about what the experience is?
Sure. So the first experience that you encounter as you arrive will be that is a front courtyard at that entry. It will be very green on green, again, to kind of communicate this feeling of arriving at a private estate. The character of the landscape is to feel very residential in quality. So rather than, as I said, treat it with one brushstroke, the landscape changes and evolves as you move throughout the property. Any topography really that will be created that you would experience is actually going to be by the plants themselves as they grow in, very much as has occurred at the Parker over the last 15 years. So there will be a variety of plants from small ground covers to mid-sized shrubs and trees, but rather than want to kind of, again, keep sort of an openness through the property so you can see from one end to the other is the intention, rather than at the existing Parker where it's very much almost these jungle-like corridors that are carved through a landscape and then you appear at an opening. So there will be a variety of plant material. All of it is from that Coachella Valley plant list and the Desert Flora plant palette, very strictly adhered to. And there will be areas that are sort of more soft and have movement with grasses and seasonal change and flowers. Other areas like that front courtyard entry will be very much more perennials and shrubs and sort of a classic form. We're not looking for a manicured experience. That isn't really what the Parker is about. But we do want to offer something that is new compared to what's existing.
Okay, thank you. So some other questions I have. Hearing the comments from the public, are there specific things you'd like to address? Like there were photographs that were passed around of semis parked along Linden. How would that be alleviated or not made worse with this new addition?
I think a little, Michael touched upon this earlier, is that with the Parker Hall entry being on Linden, any deliveries now, when this thing is complete, when this portion of the resort is completed, will be shifted only to be at the main delivery area of the resort, because much like the neighbors, the Parker management doesn't want the first impression of a guest to be a delivery vehicle. So that's clearly going to be taken into account in terms of that.
Note that, we're eliminating the area that is receiving
Yes,
those
right now
so-
there's a receiving area on the resort, and the resort engineering is in the area which is right below where it says pool area 4. That currently is the maintenance and facilities portion of the resort.
So I guess my question is, if is something being done to the existing Parker to accommodate that, all the shifting of all this? Obviously, you've lost a huge maintenance area, and all of a sudden, and there's a lot of semis that go park along Linden, but now that's all being eliminated and moved back to the
loading zone.
The loading zone
in the resort.
So
yes.
is it currently designed to accommodate all that, all the deliveries and the loading, or are they going to be making revisions to that as well?
Well, they could currently get deliveries there, but they don't, because when we'll have an event on the rear lawn, which won't happen anymore because we're going to have a resort there, they will take deliveries there.
My understanding, again, we're not the operators, but that they use it out of convenience.
Excuse me, we need to have you on microphone.
I apologize. Our understanding is that they use it out of convenience because it is available to them now. Part of this project is that we're eliminating that use and forcing them essentially to use their existing loading dock area, which to some degree is going underutilized.
Okay. Okay, I have no more questions.
I have an additional landscape question. One of the comments from the public was about the main house and the height of it, and also the hedges where if you go down Linden, Canyon Sands has a kind of a setback streetscape, and there's street trees. It's like a park-like setting almost. And so it seemed that there was some concern regarding the hedges as well as the valet structures right at the curb. And if you could just walk us through, there's a blow-up sheet within the landscape plan. The plants aren't labeled, but I was trying, I think it's, says enlarged landscape plan, sub-area 1, front entry. As to what types of plants those are, and it seems like there's a desire to kind of just keep everything hedged off similarly to what the Parker is now.
Correct.
And
I think the intention is to keep it very private, both from inside and out. So to maintain the hedging that is already existing. Obviously, we have some new cuts for the driveway. And how we're, and we want to do is use trees to screen the buildings as much as possible.
Could you bring up that slide?
The slides are not actually.
Oh, of that detail there.
This one right here.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was just wondering what some of those tree types are related back to the plant legend with the symbols and.
Right, so we have, right now we're showing 3 trees there, which is the Rus lancea, the Pinus elderica, and the brachychiton. So these, the idea is that they will create a layered kind of demi-screen, because we want to provide privacy, and we want to minimize any light coming from the building out into the street. We want to maintain the hedges, so we keep that privacy. So we also will have the ficus nitida is on here as well in the shrub category. So those are going to be the main players in helping us achieve that goal.
So what would be the species of the 2 trees that are adjacent to the little circle drop off? And then there's 4 more at the top of the sheet there.
The 2 that you're referring to, thinking the Rus lancea would do well there. The Pinus elderica is more at that southern tip there, where we need that additional height and screening for the second story. And then the brachychiton will be mixed in along that long, sort of the long arm of the building that approaches the kitchen, and with more of the Rus lancea.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. If you don't mind sitting back down, and the committee will discuss.
Thank you.
Okay. Who'd like to go first? Member Pauline?
Where to start? Okay, I guess a couple, before I start on some comments, I guess a couple questions for Flynn procedurally. As I talked, I think we kind of acknowledged that the site is underparked and parking may become a bigger issue. I also was going to ask about a traffic study, if they're required to do a traffic study for additional traffic on Linden. Will that be part of the process?
They have prepared a traffic letter that indicates the number of trips that will be generated by this additional use. Again, that's something that the Planning Commission needs to review and evaluate and determine if it's appropriate.
Right, okay. And in terms of massing, the building heights, obviously they meet guidelines. I guess my one question is, overall, I think everybody loves the building. I think the building is really stunning overall, the main building, the Parker Hall. But I feel there's a little bit of a contradiction in the fact that it's got a beautiful front facade, but it's hidden behind hedges. So the only people that really will be appreciating it is the private guests that pull up into valet. So I sort of am torn with why if that's the case, why the massing needs to be as high as it is on that side. And I'm wondering if we could have request some sightline studies from the adjacent properties so that we can understand how the massing is impacting views, and because I think that is important here. And both on Linden and on Seven Lakes, because we do have a 24-foot tall structure that runs a pretty decent length on Seven Lakes Drive as well. Just to understand, how that's impacted. In terms of the ability to evaluate, while I think the renders are really cool looking and stylized, I would like to see some renders with actual materials so that we can kind of better see how the materials are used throughout the property. Because I just, having a kind of a black and white render without understanding where the materials are is kind of hard to evaluate for me. I have a concern about, and again, I think that maybe this is more of a planning issue, but the experience from a valet person picking up a car and driving all the way around the block to park it feels like it's, a problem for me. I also didn't seem to see the street side elevations of any of the buildings. So I know they're going to be largely covered by hedges, but I would like to see those back elevations to see what the impact is, what you see over the hedges and what you don't. I think that's it for me now. I may add something later.
Member Dozy?
I think when the architects described the building itself, the main house and this estate feel, you'll see some estates have like an open lawn area in front of them, and then the building is, creates a stately effect. Others, you do drive past the hedge and you come in and the building is revealed at that point. But I take the residents of across the street, their comments in that, the building's set back about 42 feet now. So there could be adjustments to the landscape to open that up a little bit more. If that's something that could be worked out with the neighbors, if that's their desire. And there's also a benefit too to having it hedged off. So that could go either way. In terms of the landscape plan, when I look at the graphics of it, you can even look in the parking lot there on the west side, the diameter or the canopy of those trees is shown at about 60 feet. So I think if the trees, the canopies were shown accurately at 35 or 40 feet or what type of trees those are that would get that large, I think there would be additional trees that would be needed to be added to the plan. And again, I do have some concerns about, the circulation on the site, the parking, the servicing of it. That upper corner that's northwest of the kitchen area, I can see that they did a cut back there for site visibility, but, again, I think there needs to be more description of how those areas actually function, because again, those are right on the street, so if everything's hidden behind a hedge, what's really, is that going to just become another service area? And I don't think that is a good use for that particular corner at that. In terms of the landscape plan, I think this would have to come back with more detail, with the plants actually labeled. I think it's very descriptive in the narrative of how they want to develop the gardens, but to actually see a labeled plan with the species called out, because there are so much complexity to it.
Thank you.
I agree with what has been stated so far. I think the concerns about the building height with the screening that is laid out on the existing plan that we have, I think that certainly will alleviate some of the concerns about those drastic lines and a linear effect. There's a lot of softening and easing of the building into the landscape. Also, it, as stated, falls within the limits of development. I would like to see more developed plans. I think what I see here in terms of the landscape, it's gorgeous. The plant selections are beautiful. They definitely are appropriate for the desert landscaping. Statements made about irrigation and water usage are appropriate. I would like to see the, what are they calling it? They're calling it the service, well, the parking area over on the opposite side. I would like to see more development as to what that looks like with the bachelor residence and how that fits together. I have a problem with the valet as it's conceived at this point. The trucks and the parking and those things, the usage has changed, and that I see in looking at the floor plans of the building, there are entertaining areas, and they are now indoors. I think some of the noise will be alleviated. There still will be events, and that is something for Planning Commission to look at in terms of usage and flow there. No, I think it's a lovely project, and I would like to see further developed plans come back if this is approved and move forward.
Thank you. Member Walsh?
Thank you. It harkens to me to the process of any architectural development in which the programming phase is foundational. And it seems as though that what we have and have wicked up to the surface here are conflicts of the site plan involving vehicular circulation that really have remained unsolved. So I would kind of ask a bit rhetorically, I mean, what would change? Perhaps the building height would become moot if it found a new position that reflected some level of consideration of some of the site concerns. Okay, that aside, and I know we aren't wading into waters that are going to be discussed at the Planning Commission. So I'll move to something else, and that is usually in an architectural development that the challenge is achieving visual cohesion and something that kind of makes sense. And so that the people who are experiencing it kind of hangs together for them. I have much appreciation for the thought that has gone into kind of this platform of how the design evolved and whatever, but there's a part of me that kind of thinks I didn't read the right novel, you know, to kind of get the pieces to fall into place. So I think I would have a higher level of comfort if it had more cohesion to it and didn't feel quite as fragmented. And yeah, right. And, you know, all that said, I think one of the saving graces is, you know, bingo, that one elevation and that perspective has a lot of visual seduction and appeal to everybody, in spite of the fact that there are these underlying functional issues that beg to be solved. Thank you.
Well, I'm somewhat in agreement with most of the comments. I think Member Poline's suggestion of having a study done for sightlines may alleviate some of the neighbors' concerns. about being able to maintain the views to the mountains. I think it would be very helpful to know if in fact, Linden is 40 feet wide, the building is set back another 40-some feet, and your houses are set back, I don't know, another 30 feet, 40 feet. We're talking potentially of 100 to 120 foot difference, space between them. I think a sightline study could help tremendously alleviate some of the concerns about the views towards the mountains and maintaining those. I think, from a site plan point of view, I think the landscaping is really quite beautiful. I love the different types of gardens. I think Member Walsh's comment about the vehicular circulation is challenging on the site. Not only from the drop-off and the impact of the valet having to travel all the way around to get to the parking, having the internal circulation where you've got the kitchen at the farthest corner away from the trash on the property, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I think potentially there are better site plan solutions for the location of the Parker Hall. And then the other odd thing is the variation in the architectural styles. I'd like to get on board, but I too am a little challenged, especially if the landscaping does not provide enough mystery as you go through the property to create, okay, we've gone through this little pathway that you don't see, and then all of a sudden there's another type of building. But because the landscape is primarily more open, I think you're going to see all the variety of architectural styles, and it's not going to really make a lot of sense. So that was the part of my question for mounding and, yeah. So I know this is on the agenda for the Planning Commission on Wednesday. And yes, go ahead, Flynn.
Here's what I might suggest based on your comments, that we would forward the following conditions to the Planning Commission for their consideration on Wednesday. Number one, that the Planning Commission require the applicant to submit sightline studies, as you all have suggested, relative to the heights of the buildings. Number two, for the Planning Commission to request that the applicant submit a circulation plan both for their valet operations and for their deliveries, and to review those circulation plans. Number three, as part of a final plan development district package, to resubmit rendering showing all materials to the Architectural Advisory Committee. And then number four, as part of a final plan development district approval package, to submit the final landscape plan with all details. One of the other things we haven't discussed that may be appropriate as part of that final landscape plan is also to review the site lighting. Typically, that's something that we all discuss at the AAC. We didn't get into it today, but I think that would be important for you all to review as well. So those would be the conditions based on your comments that I would suggest that we forward to the Planning Commission for their discussion on Wednesday.
Okay. So let me ask you procedurally, do we approve this with those conditions?
Yes, what I would recommend that you do is to recommend approval to the Planning Commission with these following conditions that I've enumerated, and for Planning Commission consideration of those conditions.
Okay. So there's a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
And then just a reminder to the public, again, we're in council chambers at 1:30 on Wednesday. Planning Commission does have purview over circulation and parking issues, so we can discuss those then. And again, thank you to everyone. We appreciate it.
Do we want to take a 10-minute break? Anybody? Yes? Okay.
You go scream into my pillow break?
Just like I have to have a piece of paper.
How are you?
Tweaked, you know, in some of these places. Yeah, the fallback is like. Yeah. Okay. I think it's all part of it. You know, the challenge is you want to wear. Yeah, I know. Which was a great idea. West Hollywood, exactly. And then they have ping pong from there. But they are redeveloping. Well, I mean, these are rental. Yeah, no, you're like the old pencil, yeah, you need this, especially that long building. Oh, the stable finish is good. I'd like to see a render of what it's actually like. Stone. It's hard, it's like every drawing.
Well, I thought about that.
We can't really condition it to have it either.
What I would love to see you do though is
Do you think it's necessary just to speak to, we're trying to fit into the brand image and
That's a kind of a step.
that we have some friendships.
but this is where we had to start.
Right.
And then we go.
No, yeah, we could encourage them to so they recognize. Yeah, I see.
Because it really is I gave a handout, but I
Yeah, no,
it wasn't passed.
you know,
Yes, no,
This is one plan of my garden. I know, so there's 16 here. I know. Yes, subject to conditions.
that's good, and then you can use some of these. Plant milkweed. We have plant milkweed. It's gonna be a fun meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah. You said we should have asked them to apply.
Can I have a sample?
Yes, very interesting.
I appreciate you bringing it. It gets cold in here.
I know.
I brought my sweater. I thought it could be in the middle of summer. Well, right, it's like a movie theater. It'll cool down now that 50 people have left. That might have an impact on the HVAC. These guys show up like in my backyard. Watching. No, no, it's, I appreciate your report.
So changes to the agenda. I know you guys are gonna go first and I can spoke.
That's why it was very.
What's the
To say the least.
You still have a quorum, I have to excuse myself from this project.
Yeah, I think we do. We still have four of 7. Are you doing landscape?
We do a landscape plan for it.
Okay.
I forgot, it was a long time ago. I had to look at the package. So we move item 2 to consent? That one.
Okay, are we
So we're reconvening reconvening the Architectural Advisory Committee meeting of January 2nd at 5 p.m. We're moving on to the next agenda item, number 3, Pinnacle Palm Springs LLC for a major architectural application for the construction of a 3,383 square foot house on a hillside lot located at 1731 Pinnacle Point, Lot 3, Zone PDD 79, case number 3.4149 MAG. Staff, may we have a report?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to excuse myself from this project as our firm has worked on some of the plans being presented.
Back.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I want to start off by saying the applicant was here and left, but he's coming back.
Excuse me a second. John McCoy also has to recuse himself, so we don't have a quorum. So
then we'll have to move the item to the next agenda.
Yeah.
If the three of you that are here that can act on it can make a motion to continue it, we'll move it to the next agenda.
We have a motion?
I'll make a motion to continue it to the next meeting date.
Do I have a second?
I guess that has to be me. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. All right, come back, Jen.
That was quick, Len. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 4.
Hey, Glenn, do you want to keep our material so you don't have to reprint it?
Yes.
Junora Brains of Gary Wang and Associates, Inc., on behalf of the 1987 Rudderman Family Trust and the 1989 Sack Family Trust, to paint the exterior elevations and install exterior lighting fixtures at the Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant located at 725 South Palm Canyon Drive, Zone C2, Section 22. Staff, we have a report.
Yes. Thank you. As introduced, this is a proposed project to a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant located at 725 South Palm Canyon Drive. And the project site is located at the southwest corner of West Sunny Dunes and South Palm Canyon Drive, next to a vacant parcel and then also the Tuckweed Creek River. And this is a close-up view of the project site. The site has an existing freestanding restaurant and a drive-through facility. And the applicant is proposing to apply a new coat of paint to this existing restaurant, and these are the proposed colors: exotic red, wedding veil, and black horizon. And this slide shows existing images of the building, and the rendering at the bottom shows what the applicant is proposing. As you see, the applicant is proposing to paint the canopy fascia in exotic red, and then also proposing to paint the steel post in wedding veil. And this is a north elevation of the building. And just to show, it's really hard to see, but there's a shorter wall and then also the actual building wall behind it. And the project proposes to paint the shorter side of the wall red, and the part of the wall in the back in the red as well. And as you see, the canopy fascia is going to be red, and at the bottom part, the 3 feet above ground is going to be painted in black horizon. And this is the east elevation facing South Palm Canyon Drive. And again, the portion of the building is going to be painted in the exotic red, canopy fascia in red, and the steel post is going to be changed to a wedding veil, which is white. And the bottom part of the east elevation, 3 feet, will be painted in the black horizon. And the area between the window system and the ceiling, that's going to be also painted black horizon as well. And this is the west elevation of the building. West elevation is the rear elevation. And then again, the canopy fascia is going to be red. And then also the applicant is proposing to apply this striped pattern on the elevation as well. And the building has a decorative blade element at the northeast corner. And right now it's this red color, but the project proposes to change the color to wedding veil and treat the bottom of the element and paint it in the black horizon. This picture just to show the south and north elevation of this element. And then finally, the building has a tower element. The project proposes the element to be painted in exotic red on both elevations. And then also, the project proposes the installation of signage, although the application has not been submitted. Since the rendering includes a signage, staff did, we'll talk about the signage just a little bit. So this panel signage is being proposed on the tower element, as you see on the, the previous slide. And this KFC individual channel letter signs are proposed on the tower element. And stenciled graphic. They will be applied on the different elevations, just to go back a little bit. On the south elevation, on the building wall, it says world's famous chicken. And on the east elevation, there's this another made the hard way, made by hand, that's a stencil graphics. And then also the west elevation by the drive-through window. And the proposed project also includes the installation of outdoor lighting fixtures. And this is the image that the applicant provides just to give us an idea of what this light fixture is going to look like. But the project proposes the installation of light fixtures on the tower element. And the section on the right side will show how the installation is going to be taking place. There are multiple issues with this project. The proposed exotic red is a corporate color, however, it's not sympathetic to the surrounding desert landscape. And the application of this red paint really dominates over composition, and the staff did not really find any type of architectural relation to the application red to the design of the building. And also, the project does propose the installation of signage, although application has not been submitted. However, staff finds it's critical that the signage to be discussed because it's going to be a part of the overall design. And also, staff finds that the three projecting light fixtures are not really complementing the architectural design of the tower element. And finally, very similar design plans were submitted back in 2018, which was later abandoned. So I just wanted to give you the background story of the project. And concerning these things, staff recommends that the Architectural Advisory Committee deny the project as submitted with the direction for the applicant to reduce the surface area of the exotic red paint areas, and just the application of the accent color to be more compatible with the architectural design of the building. And this concludes the staff presentation.
Any questions for staff? Member Walsh?
Yes, Noriko, if they were to repaint it the same colors that it is now, they would not be here, is that correct? Their appearance and the need to go to AAC is based on a change.
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so I guess procedurally, so we saw this 2 years ago and recommended a change in eliminating most of the red, and then we're seeing essentially the same thing back again. Is that, why are we seeing it again without any modifications?
That staff can respond really, and the earlier case was actually considered abandoned because there was no response from the applicant. However, the AAC decided at the time that the plan that's proposed needs to be revised. And again, because the project was deemed abandoned, the case was closed, this was treated as a brand-new project. And that's the reason why you're reviewing today.
It's a new project.
Noriko, I have a couple questions for both you and David. There's in one of the photographs, I think it was the first one you had, that one. Oh, too fast, back one.
The tower.
There you go. It looks like there's a site wall. Is that being proposed to be painted or left at the natural block, or have they talked about that at all?
Could you please repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so in the top photograph on the right side, it looks like there's some sort of site wall. Is that, yeah, right there.
Oh, okay.
Is that part of the application? Have they addressed that, or they're just?
No, the staff's understanding that the existing wall will remain as it currently
Okay.
exists. Yes.
And then just for clarification, it could go to either Norco or David, is there's no sign application at this point. But as I understand it, the signage is what they're proposing is an integral part of the design. How do we approach that as a committee at this point?
You can provide comments about the signage as it is in concept, but there's really no action to be taken on signage, so it would just be for their information only.
Okay. And then one last question on the lighting. They showed a picture of another building. Are they proposing the same kind of spacing around the building?
The submitted plan shows, excuse me, to be more exact, the submitted elevation shows the proposed light fixture. I'm not sure how accurately that is in terms of the spacing, and we have an applicant here, so the applicant
Okay.
can certainly
All right.
confirm that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Is the applicant present? Please come up to the mic, give your name and address. Tell us about your project. You have 10 minutes to present and 2 minutes of rebuttal, if desired, after any public comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Wang from Gary Wang & Associate, 1000 Corporate Center Drive, Suite 550, Monterey Park, California, 91754. Well, we inherited this project. The previous, corporate have left, and the project kind of died, abandoned, and now they want to kind of bring it back and put it on our lap and say, here it is, run with it. So I didn't even know this was previously submitted. I'm hearing this from the first time, so no worries.
It was a little different.
Yeah, it was a little different. Right?
But still a lot of red.
Yes. So we're all ears. I mean, we're here. We want to, be part of the community. We want to be, a nice neighbor. So if we could, anything we could do to achieve that, then we're more than willing to do so. To answer the question regarding lighting, the lights we're proposing are only 3 lights on the tower. I believe, yeah, they're right there. Go back.
Okay.
Those are only the light that I believe we're proposing, so it's not going to be along the building.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any comments from the audience? Any public comments, if you'd like?
Yes.
Please state your name and your address. You have 3 minutes.
Eric Shavala, 1990 South Bundy Drive, Suite 250, Los Angeles, 90025. I represent the franchisee who operates this KFC restaurant, and the design concept in the red and white striping is the uniform reimaging that the brand is proposing. So to be in unity with the brand nationwide, this is the look that they're going for, to show more contrast and to be in unison with the so-called Americana or the history of the brand being based around the chicken bucket. Obviously, it's the red and white striping is to mimic the chicken bucket. So I heard a comment, it's not uniform with the building as it is, but it is conceptual to the brand that exists in that building. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make it more of a look endemic to the brand. And so obviously the architect is trying to do that in a way that integrates that look to the best of his ability, to make the brand happy and integrate it with the existing structure. As this is obviously a different looking KFC than the usual one you'd see with the, I guess you'd call this a Googie type style. So this is a unique KFC store for us. So integrating this brand concept with the existing building perhaps is challenging. So we hope we can come to an agreement to make you guys happy and the brand happy as well, in what we end up with. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Anyone else like to speak from the public? Yes, come up and state your name and address.
Hammond. Oh, thank you. And I live at 2449 East Sonora Road here in Palm Springs. Ironically, I was relatively new in town about 20 years ago when this property was going to be built by KFC and Taco Bell as a combined restaurant. And the neighborhoods here, which were in the process of forming, got involved with this corner and the corner diagonally across the street, the, I don't remember the name of it, Jack in the Box? Jack in the Box, to reflect the architecture and design style of Palm Springs, so that this corner would not look like an on or off ramp on I-10. So there was also, at that time, a huge discussion about drive-throughs in Palm Springs, and there was a movement to eliminate drive-throughs in downtown. And so the neighborhoods, the city, and the builder at that time had a lot of conversation about this, and this was the compromise. It is very mid-century modern. The building is very mid-century modern by design. That's what the neighbors thought would reflect the city, the community, plus the restaurant as it currently stands has no relationship with the view, the restaurant as KFC was building it at the time would not take any advantage of the views that are there, which are absolutely phenomenal. And so it was also painted in such a way as the paint was compatible with the desert and would not necessarily stand out as a beacon at the corner. So same with the restaurant across the street, that it was very subtle paint that was very consistent with colors you would see in the desert. So I'm just sharing that with you. This was maybe a year-long conversation, and I would probably, I would send it out to the neighborhoods again at this point, because the neighborhoods worked so hard on this 20 years ago so that it wouldn't look like this. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak from the public? If not, we'll conclude public comment and give the applicant a chance to rebut. Any comments? No? If no rebuttals, then we'll get questions from AAC, so if you don't mind coming back up. And do we have questions for the applicant? Shall we start with John McCoyne?
see. Okay, I'm looking at lots of pages about a light fixture, but I don't have a spec. I don't know what light fixture out of all of this information you intend to use. So in terms.
It's in there.
So, yeah, I mean, I see here's information, possibilities, mounting, patterns. I mean, there's a lot of information, but I don't know of all of the pieces and parts in here what you're actually proposing to put onto the building. I don't know, there's no color temperature, there's no lumen output, so I don't have sufficient information to make a solid decision on that portion. So unless you have more information there.
So there is a, did you get this?
Yes, that's the one that we
So it gives you all the range.
Mm-hmm. So if you go to the other section, there is a place where it says ordering information that you could fill out each of these pieces, and I would know what you're actually trying to accomplish with the light fixture. So that, I would like to, should it come back, I would like to see information of that.
Got it.
I do recall the project, and I do the architecture is very important of the building, and to keep the mid-century feel of it, the lines, the overhang reminiscent of the gas station out at the entry of town. The new paint job swaps the moves the interest to the bulk of the box versus the lightness of the intention of the design. And I don't feel that that's a good direction at this point. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Member Dozy, comments, questions?
I think there's some opportunities here to do some applications of paint, but what's proposed now, I think, is overwhelming, and it doesn't complement the architecture as well as it could. No questions.
Just a long way around, but Member Walsh.
I'd like to comment that I appreciate hearing the history, and that sort of laid the groundwork to see where it has been and where it is today. Obviously, there was abundant amount of care that went into making sure that it did something to reflect the site and the location and the visuals in a good way. It's a bit of a unique site because, and slightly iconic because of its separation from anything else. And I think if it was sandwiched inside of some existing commercial context that had like-kind expressions of corporate message, it could be acceptable and successful.
it just sounds as though that it is needing repainting from a corporate branding position. And this is a site on which I wouldn't suggest that that's necessary. Everybody knows it's there because it stands out so uniquely. It is an island. And I think it has been successful to the point that they have something reasonably refined for a fast food restaurant that's kind of working there. And I would be hard pressed to kind of support a direction that would not improve the visuals. And that's what I think we have in front of us.
Okay. No. Do you have a question, Member Paulette?
I have no question.
I have a question. So Member McCoy brought up the light fixtures, and one of the things I wrote down was the color temperature. So do you have, I mean, you can respond officially later, but do you have a sense of what color temperature you would use?
I think somewhere in the neighborhood about 3,200 Kelvin.
Okay.
A little bit warmer tone, I guess, not the white, the daylight.
Okay. And it's curious to me that you are locating the three fixtures on the tower above what the only illuminated sign is. And so what's the rationale behind that? Why wouldn't it be elsewhere? Not that I'm advocating for it, but why would it be elsewhere?
I've just been told by my associates that there's actually a discrepancy, that the light should be shining onto the kernel's face.
On the kernel's face? Ah, okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. You can be seated again, and the committee will discuss, although it sounds like we've done a lot of discussing. So who hasn't discussed? Member McCoy hasn't discussed. Oh, yes, you did.
Oops, I did. Okay, I will continue to discuss the lighting. If that new information that the light fixtures are not correctly shown and that they would come around to actually being on, more directed on the corner, from a branding thought process, I understand that. I think the 3 light fixtures are completely excessive. I don't think 1 is appropriate there. And I think the statement that was made that people already know that this is KFC and that this unique piece of architecture is easily described and easily located doesn't merit a lot more corporate branding at an intersection like this. So.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to their comments?
I mean, I think I stand by how we reviewed this last time, which is, it's excessive. There's just way too much red, and I think it just needs to be rethought. The other thing I would like you to think about in looking at the signage is the outline of the kernel is sitting on a wall that already has an indentation in it, which is kind of perfect to locate a graphic in without it overlapping it like a kind of a board applied on top. So I would look at possibly refining that in the space that would make it feel more appropriate and designed for that element.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll talk. I'm pretty much in agreement with the committee, their comments. This is an iconic looking building. It's unique kind of blend of styles, which is, but I appreciate the gesture to the mid-century more than the postmodern. I think the use of the amount of the use of the red is really overbearing for this building. And I think even though we're not reviewing it, I think the proposed numbers and sizes of the signs are also inappropriate. If this were along a freeway, as one of the committee members mentioned, I could see possibly something like this, but this is in the middle of town. It's right next to the open desert. It just seems totally inappropriate. So with that, do we have a motion? Anyone?
Motion to deny project as proposed.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Now we will move on to the next agenda. Mike's off. Now we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item number 5. David Navarro of Conserve Land Care on behalf of Sunrise East Homeowners Association for minor architectural review approval to convert 20,000 square feet of turf to desert landscaping at the Sunrise East Condominium Complex located at 2251 East Mesquite Avenue, PD 38, Section 24. Staff, may we have a report?
Yes, thank you. This is a proposed turf conversion project for the Sunrise East Condominium Complex. If you may recall, you reviewed this project back in September for the complex's main frontage, which is on East Mesquite Avenue. This proposed project actually takes place on the South Cerritos Drive and East Sonora Road, and a very tiny portion of the South Faro Drive this time. And the project area is about approximately 20,000 square feet. Again, it involves the 3 frontages. The involvement of the South Faro Drive is very partial, and this is the second phase of the turf conversion project for the complex. And this image is just to show the existing condition. The project area is extensively landscaped with turf. There is an existing meandering pedestrian pathway that runs on all of these frontages, and there is a property wall along the passage, as you see. This is just additional images again. The existing landscape on all frontages are very similar. Very long pedestrian walk, strips of turfs, and the property wall that goes parallel to the street. This is a proposed plant palette for the project. It does include mimosa, Mediterranean fan palms, Tepiana tipu, agaves, and so forth. The proposed plant materials are pretty much consistent with what were proposed and approved for the primary frontage on the East Mesquite Avenue. And again, these details are very hard to see on the screen, and the staff actually posted the 24 by 36 plans on the wall. So if you like to take a look at the close look, please do so. But the plant placement is very similar to the main frontage. A lot of drought landscape planting materials are scattered. The use of crest boulders and the crushed rocks as an accent to the different textures. And I'm just going to move on the South Cerritos Drive. The applicant's proposing the placement of red yuccas in some areas. Again, accentuated with Mediterranean fan palms and the boulders, and continue to the intersection of South Cerritos Drive and East Sonora Road, where the mimosas are proposed at the corner. The tree is going to be out of the corner cutback areas. And the similar landscape pattern on the East Sonora Road, and some street trees and some accent boulders, and reaches at the corner of East Sonora Road and South Faro Drive. There are some design issues, but the main thing is that the overall composition is weakened by a dispersed placement of red yuccas in the midsections on the South Cerritos and East Sonora Road frontages. as well as a solitary placement of boulders, and then staff can show a little bit more in detail. And then also, staff finds that the treatment of the recessed areas on the East Sonora Road can be improved as the proposed design as of now intensifies the monotonous and repetitive landscape pattern on the frontage. And considering these attributes, staff recommends AAC to approve the project subject to conditions of approval included in the report. And we have applicant in the audience today, and staff and applicant are both available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? No? Member McCoy?
Okay, I'm looking for the percentage of, what is that percentage of lawn removal?
Could you please repeat that?
I see, it's hard to discern on the plan. It says existing lawn to remain, and then there's some areas that are shaded that would be planted, but lawn is remaining. What's the percentage of lawn being removed?
Are you referring to the overall project area?
Yeah.
Or, you just noted as a 20,000, but it does not show the frontage. I think I can ask the applicant.
Okay.
To see if he can provide the information.
Any other questions for staff? No? Thank you. Is the applicant present? Please state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes to present your project and 2 minutes of rebuttal if needed.
Hi, I'm David with Conserve Land Care. We are at 72265 Manufacturing Road in Thousand Palms, California. In regards to your question about the turf, it's just at the corner of, I believe, Cerritos and Sonora. The percentage that we try to, when we were looking at this as a design, we were looking at, we see the importance of lawn and how it's almost now as a luxury. So being that it is a corner, we were trying to capture, just give it a little sense of pop, a little bit more interest in that corner. So what we based it on, if I had to give it a percentage, I would say about 50% on that, just that corner. The overall project, we're removing unsightly turf, areas that are hard to irrigate, and there were a few spots up against the perimeter wall, that little niches that we were taking out. But overall, it would be considered, like, at least for us, a complete turf conversion, so 100%.
Okay. Anything else you want to?
We wanted to, the community, we received a lot of accolades or, positive feedback from the HOA and bystanders, people walking around. And they really seemed to be positive about the turf conversion we did on East Mesquite. There is something that doesn't relay very well on paper, but when you actually get to the site, there's contouring that would go into play. And we would continue that on South Cerritos in the phase 2 of the project.
Is there anybody from, anyone from the public like to come up and comment? Please state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Christine Hammond. My address is 2449 East Sonora Road. I am on the south side of this complex, and I know a lot of people inside the complex, and they are very happy about this turf removal project, and I'm happy for them. I do have one major concerns and a couple of minor concerns. And the minor concern is primarily that Sonora is pretty much bereft of, well, it'll continue to be lawn, except for a couple of niches that will have a single plant, maybe one has a 3-plant garden area inside one of the niches in the wall. But my major concern is the tree that they're putting into the strip between the sidewalk and the curb. And that is the tepu tree. And I made a copy of a piece just so that you would have the full thing. My issues are, it's a very fast, it's not a native plant to begin with. It comes from South America, and it's tropical. So the South Africa has labeled it a, what did they call it? A Category 3 invasive species. It is a plant that grows very fast, a tree that grows very fast. In the first 5 years, it could grow 30 feet tall, and it will get as high as 100 feet. It sounds like the root structure is fairly superficial, and in fact, the planting instructions for it advise you not to cover any of the root structure around the trunk. But in this particular area, we do get wind, and the wind in this complex in particular, about 10 years ago, we had a good windstorm here that took out 39 trees in that area. So I'm sensitive to trees, and I know they are too, because they had to pay to have all these trees removed, and it made a huge dent on their landscape. But it concerns me about that. The Sonora is 65 feet wide. If a tree like this is planted in the curb strip there, and it topples over in a windstorm, then it will cover Sonora. It'll cover the 25-foot setback for the houses along Sonora, and the top of the tree would be in their living room and bedrooms and garage. So that's a concern to me. The root spread on this tree is aggressive, and that's the term of the literature, and I'm just using it. It will lift concrete curbs and asphalt. If it's planted up next to a foundation, it will lift the foundation. So City of Palm Springs has spent millions of dollars over the last several years to resurface our streets, all of the streets around this complex being some of those streets. And I would just hate to have to see 20 trees planted around this complex that have the potential of lifting the curbs and damaging the asphalt. The tree drops seeds. The seeds germinate very quickly, and they are invasive. So unless there's extremely careful landscape care, you're faced with a whole forest of trees very quickly. The canopy of this tree can be 20 to 50 feet from the center, or as large as 1,200 square feet.
Thank you, Christine, sorry.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will the applicant come back? And do we have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Walsh? None?
Well, the only thing I would ask is, because I see the tipu tree is provided by the HOA, so it's something that they've approved internally to use throughout the property. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the teepal tree came from the East Mesquite project, phase 1 of the turf conversion. But I know that the community wouldn't be opposed to. They actually, some of the board members talked about using a different type of tree. We're not. I don't think they're set on the tip of the tree. We could probably do like an olive that's multi-trunk. That's a slow-growing tree. Would be a benefit to the community. You know, it wouldn't. It'd be an aesthetic. It'd give them color. And in regards to the wind, it would do a lot better. Just because it's a slower-growing tree and it's multi-trunk, so it'd give it some height and color. And it would also address the wind concern, and they don't propagate. So if we would go with the olive, we would probably do a fruitless olive, so we wouldn't have the fruit bearing.
Member Dozy?
A couple, looking at the plan, I can see that there's more space behind the side, between the back of the sidewalk and the wall, where you could maybe plant these trees in the, you know, and they'd have more areas for the roots and so forth. But I think, is there any reason why with the design, you know, we've got the curvilinear sidewalk and only the area between the sidewalk and the street, other than that corner and a couple straight little cutouts are being, so was there any consideration of carrying the desert landscaping on both sides of the sidewalk in certain areas where you could do an additional cutout of turf, you know, between the back of the walk and the wall, and that way you kind of create an experience for someone coming down, plus it eliminates more runoff towards the sidewalk?
Can I answer? The community, they call this space between the curb and the sidewalk devil strip because it never looked good and it was hard to irrigate, hard to maintain. So their primary focus is to try to maintain as much turf as they can on the property, and then the areas that are not easily maintained or don't necessarily make sense to water and to maintain. Those were the areas that they were looking to take away, and and if I'm speaking in regard for the HOA, they have existing pine trees all along all three streets. If the city would be okay with it, I'm sure the HOA would be happy not to plant trees in that, you know, double strip, if you will.
Okay. Any other questions? John?
Are there any existing trees in the Devil's Strip?
No trees.
Okay, that's what.
Where you got the trees located, I mean, did you cite them based on a sort of a minimum width requirement?
We looked at the width between the curb and the sidewalk, and then we also looked at the spacing in between the existing pine trees, I guess it would be between the sidewalk and the existing perimeter wall.
And so what's like the minimum width where you cited the trees? Can you?
Yeah, ballpark, I'd say between 5 to 6 feet, you know, and we'd install it right in the center.
And with your experience with plant material and the comments that we heard from Christine, what do you think about the root structure being that close to the curb and within, you know, a 5 to 6 foot planting area?
I'll be honest, I agree with her. We see that tree, I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit because I'm the one that designed it, but we followed what we did on East Mesquite, and to have that continuity or that sense of community, we continued that tree. But if we can, and you know, we could always install a different type of tree like the olive.
Okay.
The olive would also, you know, if we do install a small tree, it would still give us a height element that I think is necessary, you know. So we have the low ground covers, your medium shrubs, and then, you know, a few accents with the trees.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. So let's discuss.
I'll start.
Sure.
You know, the tippos are used in parking lots. There's some large tippos at the airport, you know, along the largest I've seen is as you're going across, I guess it would be Bilardo or the cut-through road on the right where they have the parking for the taxi service. They've allowed those to get huge and mature. They're a nice tree. I think that the area between the sidewalk and the street is too narrow to put these. If they wanted to use a larger canopy tree or a street tree like that, I would recommend that it go between the back of the sidewalk and the wall someplace. And I would also recommend that for the design to flow properly, that it work on both sides of the sidewalk, that there's some areas where the sidewalk comes down towards the street and they could do a reverse cutout on the wall side adjacent to the sidewalk so that, there's the planter beds follow the movement of the walkway and it has a better flow to it.
Member Walsh?
The one point in the staff report, number 3, about the positioning of the boulders, wasn't it? Did I read that correctly? Did that get addressed? I'm sorry, I misread. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, placement of the boulders. Dispersed placement of the red yucca and solitary placement of the boulders. Has that been addressed at all? No.
No.
Okay. So that sounds like something that should certainly be integrated.
Right, okay. All right. Any other discussion?
No comments for me.
Okay. John?
I agree with Member Dosey, and in terms of the layout and design, it just seems a little sparse, as was noted in the staff report, and I would concur that we need to increase the quantities and look at the design of it.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we have a motion. Do we want to move that we approve it based on the conditions that staff recommended? Or do you want to come back and see something?
I would make a motion that we move it forward and approve it based on our comments and staff's recommendations. And an additional comment, can we make?
Sure.
I think the slide that she's referred to is where those hesperales are just kind of in that area. And I think perhaps those could be grouped with the boulders where there's a little bit more width. And maybe in some of those areas where that's narrow between the edge of the sidewalk and the curb, it could just be a rock treatment. I don't think it has to be, maybe get more impact.
I think we're still discussing, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, John. I don't know. I think staff, it's up to you. I think staff can probably manage it. Okay. So can we get a motion from somebody?
I'll make a motion for approval with the conditions and comments.
Okay. And David, do you want to read the comments back, or you think you have them all?
I mean, the comments that we have are staff's the motion was per staff's conditions in your memorandum. And then Member Dozy had some comments regarding trees being planted behind the sidewalk as opposed to the space between the sidewalk and curb.
And that there be some desert landscape cutouts behind the sidewalk between the wall.
So it undulates.
Exactly. And that if there's the opportunity to add some milkweeds in the design, I think it would be a fine time to do so.
Here, here.
Okay.
All right.
And then also group the Hesperia with the boulders. Okay.
Right.
Good. Do we have a second?
Second.
Shall we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our new business. So that concludes today's agenda. Is there any other new business from committee or staff? If not, then we are adjourned at 5:55.
to Tuesday, the 21st.
Oh, sorry.
So just
I didn't have that on.
enjoy the holiday on Monday, January 20th. So unlike normally we meet on Mondays, it'll be Tuesday in 2 weeks. All right? Thank you.